For 18 years, the tribes of Israel bent under a foreign yoke, tribute flowing east to a throne fattened on their harvests and their fear. Eglon, king of Moab, had allied with Ammon and Amalek, crossing the Jordan to seize the city of palms and choke Israel's spirit. The people had forgotten the God who freed their fathers from Egypt, chasing idols carved from wood and stone until judgment found them. Grain that should have fed their children was carried instead across the river, sacks stacked before a king who never lifted a blade himself. In the hill country of Benjamin lived a man named Ehud, son of Gera, quiet, watchful, and marked by a trait his enemies would underestimate. Ehud was left-handed, a rare thing among his tribe, a detail so small that no guard ever thought to search the side it favored. Every year the elders chose men to carry Israel's tribute to Eglon's court, a bitter parade of submission dressed as diplomacy. This year, the lot and the whispers of the people fell upon Ehud, a man few suspected of carrying anything sharper than resentment. He accepted the duty without protest, though something colder than obedience had already begun forming behind his calm expression. At night, alone in his house, Ehud forged a dagger unlike any tribute-bearer had carried before, a blade sharpened on both edges. The weapon measured barely the length of a forearm, small enough to vanish beneath a cloak, deadly enough to finish what it started. He strapped the dagger to his right thigh beneath his garment, a place no Moabite guard would think to search on a right-handed man, because every soldier searched for weapons on the left hip. Where swords hung from right-handed hands, Ehud's difference became his disguise. He practiced the draw in silence, right hand crossing to left thigh, the motion smooth enough to pass as adjusting a robe. When the tribute caravan departed for Moab, Ehud walked among the bearers, sacks of grain and jars of oil loaded on donkeys beside him. The road wound east toward the Jordan, then further into Moabite territory, past watchtowers manned by soldiers bored with routine tribute days. Eglon's palace rose ahead, its walls thick with captured wealth, a monument built on 18 years of another nation's suffering. The king himself waited in his upper chamber, a cool room built above the summer heat, reserved for his private comfort alone. Eglon was, by every account, an extraordinarily fat man, his size itself a symbol of the excess he had extracted from Israel. Servants fanned him as tribute-bearers filed past, laying grain and treasure at his feet while he barely lifted his eyes to acknowledge them. Ehud presented his portion of the tribute like the others, bowing with practiced humility, betraying nothing of the blade against his thigh. When the ceremony ended, Ehud turned and left with the rest of the bearers, walking calmly out through the palace gates. He continued past the quarries near Gilgal, stone idols carved into the hillside, monuments to gods that had never freed anyone. There Ehud stopped, turned back alone toward the palace, leaving his companions to continue home without him, unaware of what he planned. He returned to the gate and requested an audience, telling the guards he carried a secret message meant only for the king. The guards, having already searched the bearers once that day, waved the solitary man through without a second inspection of his robes. Ehud was led back into the cool upper chamber where Eglon sat alone, resting after the tribute ceremony had drained his patience. "I have a secret message for you, O king," Ehud said, his voice low, deliberately mysterious enough to draw the king's full attention. Eglon, curious and perhaps flattered by secrecy meant only for him, ordered his attendants out of the room to hear it privately. The doors closed, and for the first time all day, the king of Moab sat completely alone with a man from Israel. Eglon rose from his seat, a gesture of respect or curiosity, perhaps sensing the message carried unusual weight worth standing for. In that instant, Ehud reached across his own body with his left hand, drawing the hidden dagger from his right thigh in one motion. "I have a message from God for you," Ehud said, and drove the blade deep into the king's soft, unresisting belly. The dagger sank entirely, hilt and all, swallowed by the king's own weight, fat closing over the wound before blood could even escape. Eglon collapsed without a cry, loud enough to alarm the guards outside, his enormous frame slumping across the chamber floor. Ehud did not pause to retrieve the weapon, knowing speed mattered more than the blade now buried inside a dead king. He stepped calmly to the doors, locked them from the outside, and walked unhurried through the porch as though nothing had happened. The locking mechanism sealed the chamber completely, buying Ehud precious time before anyone would think to check on the king. He passed through the palace corridors with the same composed pace he had used entering, betraying no trace of what he had just done. Outside, Ehud slipped past the remaining guards and vanished into the countryside before anyone realized the tribute-bearer had returned. Inside the palace, Eglon's servants waited outside the locked upper room, assuming their king simply required privacy for personal relief. Minutes stretched into an uncomfortably long wait, the servants shifting nervously, unwilling to disturb a king known for his temper. They whispered among themselves, embarrassed by the delay, none daring to be the one who interrupted whatever the king was doing. The wait grew long enough to become suspicious, yet still no servant summoned the courage to knock on the sealed doors. Eventually, shame gave way to fear, and someone finally fetched a key, unwilling to bear responsibility for the silence any longer. When the doors opened, the servants found their king lying dead on the floor, a weapon still buried in his body. Screams echoed through the palace as the discovery spread, the realization dawning that the quiet tribute-bearer had been an assassin. By the time the alarm reached the guards outside, Ehud had already crossed back toward the quarries and vanished into Israelite territory. He did not return home quietly to hide, but instead pressed onward into the hill country of Ephraim, blowing a ram's horn. The trumpet's call carried across the hills, a sound every Israelite recognized as a summons to war, not a routine gathering. Men emerged from their fields and homes, drawn by the blast, gathering around Ehud as word of the king's death spread. "Follow me," Ehud told them, "for the Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands this very day." The gathered Israelites, still absorbing the shock of what had happened in Eglon's chamber, rallied quickly behind their unlikely deliverer. Ehud led them down toward the fords of the Jordan, the only crossing points Moabite soldiers would need to use for retreat. He positioned his men at each crossing, seizing control of the river before panic among the Moabites could organize an orderly withdrawal. Word of the king's assassinations spread through Moabite ranks stationed across Israelite land, scattering their command structure into confusion. Soldiers who had occupied Israelite towns for nearly 2 decades suddenly found themselves cut off from their capital and their king. Without Eglon's authority to direct them, Moabite units broke into disorganized groups, each attempting to retreat toward the safety of the river. But the fords were no longer open, Ehud's men holding every crossing point the Moabites needed to escape back across the Jordan. What followed was less a battle than a slaughter, disciplined Israelite fighters cutting down disorganized soldiers desperate to reach the other side. 10,000 Moabite men fell at the crossings that day, their bodies left along a river that had once marked their conquest. Ancient accounts describe every one of them as strong, able-bodied men, the very soldiers who had enforced Moab's grip on Israel. Not a single Moabite escaped across the Jordan that day, the fords Ehud seized, becoming a wall no fleeing soldier could pass. News of the victory spread through the hill country faster than the trumpet blast that had started it, town after town rising in support. Moab's occupying presence in Israel collapsed within hours. 18 years of tribute and submission undone by a single locked door. Israel's elders, who had chosen Ehud almost at random to carry tribute, now recognized him as the deliverer their prayers had summoned. The land that had bent under Eglon's weight for nearly 2 decades suddenly stood free, its fields no longer taxed for a foreign throne. Ehud's left-handedness, once an oddity mentioned only in passing, became the very detail history would remember him for forever. No guard had thought to check the right side of a man's robe, and that single oversight had cost an empire its king. The dagger, forged in secret and hidden in plain sight, proved sharper than any army Moab could have raised against Israel. Eglon's court, built on captured wealth and false security, had never imagined its downfall would arrive disguised as a tribute-bearer. The servants who waited outside the locked chamber, too fearful to interrupt their king, unknowingly gave Ehud the time he needed to escape. Their embarrassment at the delay, more than any loyalty, had shaped the outcome of that entire campaign without them realizing it. Ehud's plan required no army at the moment of the killing, only patience, a hidden blade, and a body no one thought to search. The story of his escape through the porch, doors sealed behind him, became a quiet lesson in how empires fall from small oversights. Unlike warriors remembered for open battle, Ehud's legacy rested on a single private moment behind a locked door in enemy territory. The scripture records the peace that followed his act, describing 80 years without war, an entire generation raised free from tribute. Children born the year Eglon died would grow old before Moab dared threaten Israel's hill country again in the same way. Ehud himself is remembered afterward as a judge, one of the deliverers raised up whenever Israel cried out under oppression. His story stands among a series of judges, each rising after periods of Israelite unfaithfulness invited foreign powers into their land. What sets Ehud apart is the intimacy of his method, a king killed alone in a private room rather than on any battlefield. The physical detail of Eglon's size, emphasized in the account, underscores how completely the dagger disappeared inside the king's own body. Ancient readers would have understood the assassination as both a literal killing and a symbol of Moab's bloated, corrupt rule collapsing inward. The locked door becomes almost a character itself in the story, buying the minutes that separated Ehud's escape from his capture. Servants who assumed their king was simply relieving himself in private reveal how ordinary caution, misapplied, can shield the boldest of plots. The trumpet call at Ephraim shows how quickly a demoralized people can mobilize once a symbol of oppression has visibly fallen. Ehud's leadership after the killing mattered as much as the killing itself, since a dead king alone would not have freed Israel. Seizing the fords of the Jordan proved the decisive military stroke, trapping soldiers who might otherwise have regrouped and retaliated. The completeness of that victory, with no Moabite escaping, ensured Moab could not immediately rebuild its occupying force after the defeat. 80 years of peace, the longest rest recorded among the judges' era, testifies to how thoroughly this single act altered the region's balance. Ehud's story rarely receives the attention given to more famous deliverers, yet its blend of stealth, timing, and courage rivals any of them. The account offers no grand miracle, no parted sea or collapsing wall, only one man's hidden blade and a door he knew how to lock. In an era remembered for judges who each faced different threats, Ehud's tale remains uniquely intimate, quiet, and unnervingly precise in its violence. His left hand, his ordinary appearance, and his patient planning combined into something no Moabite guard's training had prepared them to catch. The tribute he carried that day was real, the grain and oil genuine, making his return to the palace seem utterly unremarkable. That ordinariness, more than any weapon, was what allowed him to walk twice past guards, who never suspected a second visit meant danger. Historians and readers alike still note how a single overlooked detail, a man's dominant hand, altered the course of an entire nation's freedom. Eglon's court, so certain of its security, fell not to an army at its gates, but to a stranger it had already dismissed as harmless. Israel's brief peace, after decades of subjugation, began in a locked upper room, sealed by the very man who had just delivered death inside it. Ehud walked away from that palace unnoticed, and in doing so, gave his people 80 years free from the weight of a foreign crown.